Hello, and welcome to the BYU Library Family History webinar. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Rachel Bettis, and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You're welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar is on June 6th with James Tanner. It will be on exploring the MyHeritage DNA tools. If you'd like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we're pleased to hear from Koji Sekiguchi on researching genealogy records in Japan. Before we begin, here is a little bit about Koji. Koji Sekiguchi is a passionate genealogist and a manager at Kaju Incorporated, dedicated to helping Japanese individuals trace their ancestral roots. With a degree in economics from Brigham Young University, Koji combines his professional expertise with a lifelong passion for family history research. Growing up in a family devoted to genealogical work, Koji developed a deep appreciation for the importance of connecting with one's heritage. This hobby has evolved into his lifetime purpose to assist those of Japanese descent, known as Nikkei, in discovering their ancestors and reconnecting with their homes in Japan. Leveraging his extensive experience and network, Koji is committed to providing a valuable guidance and support to those seeking to explore their Japanese heritage. We'll now turn the time over to Koji.
All right, thank you so much for the introduction. So today, I would like to talk about researching genealogy records in Japan. So first, I'll show you the chart here. This is a list of the resources I would generally use for researching Japanese ancestors. I mean, there are a lot of resources we could actually look it up for research. But today, my main focus is to show how I would do the genealogy work in Japan in general. And due to the time restriction, I will just only picked up few resources that I would mainly use for general research. And my intention for this presentation is hopefully after this presentation, people are confident enough to how to get started Japanese ancestor research. If you have, and first I would probably apologize in advance because I haven't spoken English for a while, so maybe my English might be a little bit difficult to understand. So if you have any questions, you could ask me at the end of the presentation, or you could also email me as well. So I'll just start. So when it comes to Japanese ancestor research, there are a lot of the research to look it up. But I would say the first and the most important resource will be a family register. It's also called Koseki in Japanese. So first, I'll give you a little explanation about Koseki records. So Koseki family register started in 1820. After Meiji Restoration, there's a big change from samurai era to emperor era. So that time, Japan's government system changed a lot. And one of the things that changed is their Koseki records, their system of the family registers. Throughout the Koseki records, style changed from time to time. There are about 5 styles for each Koseki. I'll show you some of the examples. But throughout those Koseki styles, information could be a little bit different, and how they put is also different. But the basic information is same throughout all the styles. So Koseki records lists some of the basic information about each Japanese person. So name, dates, and also permanent domicile, permanent their address. And consider Koseki record as vital records in the United States, like birth certificate, death certificate. So pretty much Koseki carries all those vital informations. But I would say different is the Koseki record. There's like name, dates, address, but not necessarily they explain like a detailed information, like how they died, or so it could be just more simple information. Yeah. Then technically, like all the Japanese citizens who should have like those Koseki records. And if you are second or third Japanese American in the United States, and if you haven't filled the application or applied, you may not have those Koseki records. But if you're born in Japan and if you have a Japanese citizenship, you should have a Koseki record for sure. So this is the example of Koseki. This is the more like modern version of Koseki record. It's pretty recent. You can see it's all printed, typed. So circle in the red is permanent domicile. That's the address of the person. Then orange should be the name. Then within the Koseki record, this is my father's Koseki record. So first half is about my father's information. It talks about when he was born and who is his father and who is his mother. But also it talks about his marriage to, who he's married to, and when he's married to. Then second half is the Koseki information about my mother. So again, same thing, like where she was born and where she's married, who she's married to. So this one is pretty easy. Probably any Japanese can read it. Then the second one, this is more the older style, probably one of the oldest styles of Koseki records. You could see older version is handwritten. So some of the parts are really difficult to read and probably not, I would say only if you haven't practiced reading those old kanji, even like a native Japanese wouldn't be able to read those Koseki records. So again, same, the top right circle in the red shows like their permanent domicile, their address, home address. Then circle in the orange is the name of the head of the household. Then in the circle in the green, it shows like their family relations. It says like the head of the household, wife, first son, second daughter, third daughter, son, so on. So even if you're able to get those like the old Koseki records, you might not be able to read it because of the difficulty of like reading those old Japanese. All right. Then I said the beginning of the presentation, I said that Koseki is the first and the most important genealogy resources. That I'll explain why Koseki is so important. If you're familiar with like Japanese ancestor research, probably everyone talks about, oh, Koseki is the important, Koseki is the first step. So I will explain why. So first thing is, by reading Koseki records, you'll be able to know the names of our ancestors, but not only like names of their ancestors, but also their names with the kanji. Japanese is Chinese characters called kanji. So example, my name is Koji Sekiguchi. So Koji Sekiguchi can be read in the different combinations of kanji. First one is my kanji, but those like the combinations kanji, all of them can be read Sekiguchi. So first one is Sekiguchi, 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 and also second one is Koji. So kanji is like the combination of like the like because even like my name Koji, first part of the kanji is ko, the second part is ji, and they're pretty much interchangeable. So there's like infinite combinations you can have for reading Koji Sekiguchi. So without knowing like the kanji for someone's ancestor's name, it's extremely difficult to find their information, because especially like the older records are written their names in kanji. All right, so that's why first like just looking up Koseki and finding out their ancestors' names with kanji is very important. The second thing is to finding out their permanent domicile and residence, which is called Koseki. By collecting their ancestors' Koseki, it also shows where they used to live. It's kind of the idea of where their ancestral village was. So after before 1800s, because of the cultural background, it was really difficult to move around. So if you're able to narrow down the oldest permanent domicile, that kind of tells us that where your ancestors used to live for like the last 200, 300 years ago. So that's why it's important to first find out their permanent domicile. So now I'll talk about some of the requirements for requesting Koseki. So first, there are three things you have to know to request Koseki. So first, again, name with the Koseki. If you're requesting for your own, you know your name, so you don't really need anything. But if you're looking for your ancestors' Koseki records, you have to know their names with the kanji. I heard some of the places might accept with only like the alphabet, but I heard that in general they have to, like those like the people who working for those government should know their names with the Koseki, and it must be exact. The second part is you also need to prove that you are a direct descendant of someone's ancestor. So what you might need is a copy of ID and also birth and death certificates and also immigration records. If you're just simply, if you have your own Koseki record, it will just directly tell you who your parents are. So you might not need like those things. You just need like your ID and also your Koseki record to pull up your ancestors' Koseki records. The third thing is permanent domicile. So it's like address, but you need like exact address, which means including house and lot numbers to request their Koseki records. Because in Japan, Koseki records are recorded and kept by the municipal offices. So there are a lot of like the offices in Japan, and associated. In order to find out which municipal office has someone's Koseki record, it's based on the permanent domicile recorded in those Koseki record. And I just checked roughly, and there are about 2,000 municipal offices. So first thing you need to do is you need to find out which municipal office actually has your Koseki record or your ancestors' Koseki records. So this is the geographic map of Japan divided by regions and prefectures. So number 13 is Tokyo. But even within the Tokyo, there are like a lot of wards and the city offices. So you have to know which city office actually has your Koseki record. And so this is the recent experience I had. So my friend who has a Japanese Japanese ancestors, and when he traveled from US to Japan, he wanted to request the Koseki records for his ancestors. Okay, then he thought his ancestors, his grandparents, are from Western Japan, so he tried to go to like the nearest city office where his grandparents are from. But after looking up his grandparents' information, I found out his grandparents' permanent domicile was actually close to Tokyo. So if he decided to go to like the nearest city office in the east, like Western Japan, probably he wouldn't be able to get any Koseki records. They will say like, oh, we don't have like any records of your grandparents. So it's so critical to find out where actually your ancestor permanent domicile is. And also you need to find out which is the associated municipal office. So that's one of the hardest part. Yep. But especially when you're collecting Koseki records, there are some of the points that I would point out. Just be careful. Like the first thing, permanent domicile recording the Koseki record doesn't necessarily mean that where ancestors lived. Especially older Koseki, permanent domicile should be where they actually lived. But especially like the modern Koseki records for like the last 50 years or 100 years, permanent domicile doesn't mean like the way your ancestors live. This is a little bit difficult concept, but even if you don't live in specific address, you can decide any place to be your permanent domicile. So in Japan, professional baseball is pretty big in Japan. So some of the people, they decide the address of baseball stadium to be their permanent domicile. They could completely do that if they want to. And I know some of the people do it. And some people just decided to make their permanent domicile to be the address of where they're married or where they propose to his or her partner or something like that. So that's why like you have to be careful with like the permanent domicile. You can't just think that like a permanent domicile is actually where your ancestors live. So just be careful. All right. And the second part is the privacy issue in Japan. So again, I said one of the requirements is that you have to be the direct descendant of your ancestors. Due to the privacy law in Japan, we used to be able to collect anyone's Koseki record, but now you can only request and collect the Koseki record for your ancestors. It has to be you have to be the direct descendant. So, which means, for example, if you're married to someone and when you want to request for your spouse or your partner's ancestors records, you are not able to do that. Your wife can be the only person who is able to request part your own ancestors' Koseki records. But for my case, when I search Koseki records for behalf of my clients or someone who needs help, I ask them to provide notarized power of eternity so that I'm able to collect Koseki records on behalf. And this privacy, and also when it comes to Koseki record, you can request that those requesting can only go up. Means I can request Koseki records for myself, my parents, my great parents, and so on. But after like going back to my grandparents, we can go down to request Koseki record for my uncle or aunt, nephew, niece, cousin. So I can only go up for requesting. The third part is those Koseki records can be lost in the future. So the government preserved Koseki records for 150 years. It used to be 80 years. So during the time, the preservation period was 80 years. Some of the municipal offices decided to discard some of the Koseki records. So when you try to request some Koseki records, your ancestors' Koseki record might be gone already. And also in Japan, Japan is blessed with like great nature, but also that means we have a lot of natural disasters, as you may know. And also previous wars, because of the previous wars, some of the Koseki records are lost. So that means when you have a chance to request Koseki records, you should do it now. In the future, you might not be able to collect those Koseki records. So after Koseki research, this is the first and most important research. So now, what do we do to research for the further research for your ancestors? There are basically two routes that we can search your ancestors. First one is your ancestors' name listed in those old Koseki records. You can look it up like those records by searching their names to see if they show up in any documents. The second thing you can do is you can look up their permanent domicile. So I would share a couple of resources for each route to do like their ancestor research work. The first part is like the ancestors by searching ancestors' name. So first thing, after I finding out my ancestors' name, what I would do first is I go to National Library. National Library has like a lot of the collections, and one of the great things about National Library is they have digital collections. There are more than like 5 million items are digitalized, and they digitize like a lot of like the materials like pretty much every year, and they can be read online, and also it's completely free. So I always use like a National Library digital collections first. But you also need to be careful. The person has to be older than 18 years old, and also it needs to be a Japanese resident. You don't have to be a Japanese citizen, but you have to physically located in Japan in order to use it. And also due to copyright, even some like the collections or items are digitalized, you might need to go to the National Library physically to look up some of the documents due to like the copyrights issues. Yeah. So that's what I would do. Yeah. And also, I would look up some old newspapers. The first newspaper was published in the Meiji era in Japan. And the main newspapers are already digitalized, but you also need to go to the library physically to look up those newspapers. Some of the challenges that if your ancestors are from not the if your ancestors are from somewhere like maybe from the countryside, some of the local newspapers are not digitalized yet, so you might need to go to places physically to look it up one by one. So it could be a little bit time consuming. Also, I would look it up directory, especially back in 100 years or 100 years ago. There's like some directories that I would look it up. One is Genealogy. This is like a phone book in the United States. It lists like all the names of the people with the occupations, address, and the phone numbers. So by searching your ancestor's name, some of your ancestors' name might show up in those Jinmeiroku. And also there's like the Shinshiroku as well. This is a list of the people who had more impact in Japanese society. So its main focus is the names of people who are government officials, politicians, celebrities, or someone who worked in the famous companies or so on. So by looking up those directly, you might be able to get like a little information about your ancestors, right? Then those Jinmeiroku might be able to help you to find out your ancestors in information about their religious background, academic background as well, right? This is the name directory. It's like a dictionary. It shows like a name with like their wife's name, where they're from, where they are born, and what have they accomplished in their life. So it would be great if you're able to find your ancestors' name in those directories. I would also look up the military records. But tricky part is it depends on like which branch of the military your ancestors served in. The place that you will request your records can be different. If your ancestors served in the army, each prefecture is in charge of their records. So you have to go to each prefecture to look it up. If your ancestors served in Navy, then all the records are kept by the government. So you'll go to the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare to look it up. So those like the military records are recorded from about 1931 to 1945, and it helps you to find out your ancestors' rank, troops, and also the wars that they participated. All right, and also those two places are not the only places you can look it up your ancestors' military record. There are some other places might have their documents as well, like for example, Ministry of Defense. So this will help you find out your ancestors if they participate in the military or how they participate in the military. I would also look up old land registers as well. You can request those resources at the Legal Affairs Bureau. It shows like it lists like the assets and the heads of the households of specific address. And this is also completely free, but it's written in the different units from like a modern Japanese unit So if you're not familiar with Japanese, like old Japanese, it might be a little bit difficult to understand. It talks about the size of like the land they owned, and also the tax, how much they paid, depends on like the size of their property. And especially older permanent domicile, the address shows up in those old land registers are usually the same. But if you have like a modern address permanent domicile, that those address might listed in the old land register might be different. So you have to be careful by when you look it up. And I don't know, and also not so much with the privacy for the old land registers. It always makes me wonder, but especially for the Koseki records, you have to be exact a direct descendant. But when it comes to old land registers, you don't have to direct descendant of specific land you owned. So pretty much anyone can request any land. And when you look up all the land registers, it also shows who owned specific land or property. So there will be like names in those registers. But somehow those ones is not so much with the privacy issue. So you can look it up any land for free. And also, if you want to request those map as well, old map, this one is not free, but you can request. It's one map is about 450 yen, so it's like $3-4. Then you can look it up. Then you can cross-reference those old land registers with map as well. Right. The next part, if when you know the permanent domicile, the second route is you're gonna narrow down your ancestors' information by looking up their permanent domicile. So one of the things we can do is looking up their Buddhist temple. It's also called the Bodaiji. So why Buddhist temples is in the 200-300 years ago in Japan, in the Edo era, the government prohibited any Christianity to come in Japan. So what they did was that every Japanese needed to be affiliated with a Buddhist temple. So pretty much they made everyone to be the Buddhist. So what they did was each local Buddhist temple to take the records of those locals close to those temples. Then those temples did all the marriage and also did the funerals as well. So those local Buddhist temples should have the records of those local people around those temples. So that means when you find out your oldest permanent domicile, your ancestors, one of the new temples should be the Bodaiji, should be the affiliated Buddhist temple. So those Buddhist temples usually have Buddhist death registers, which is when someone passed away, they write their information down to the death register called Kakocho. And so those like a Buddhist temple might have the information about your ancestors. But hardest part is it's really difficult to search those Bodaiji. And also when you find out which temple is actually your Bodaiji, they might not show those like the records if you don't have any connection prior to requesting those copies of registers. So this is the image of death registers. It also has not only their actual name, but some of them can be only written with like their Buddhist post-human name. So the name can be different from the name you can find in the Koseki records. So that's a little bit tricky part. And also those Buddhist temples always have a lot of the gravestones. So some of the gravestones might be your ancestors' gravestones. So that's why it's really important to find out which one is your associated Buddhist temple. I would also look up a local history journal, which is really main key to find out your ancestors and information. So historical records of each local area is recorded those local history journal. And those documents can be found at the local libraries, also historical museums. However, many of the records are still not digitalized. So you might need to contact those libraries or museums via phone calls or email to see if they have any resources about your ancestors. Also, knowing who publishes, the publishers, authors, or references about those local history journal is also the essential information to track down your ancestors' research as well. And also I would search to see if there's like the main family branch, which is called Honke. In Japan, there used to be the patriarchal system in Japan. It's really hard concept to explain, but now basic unit for the records in Japan right now is like the couple, wife and the husband and their kids. That's like the basic unit. So when someone get married, someone will be out of like their parents' Koseki record and they'll create their own. But before World War II, they use like the system of family clan is the basic unit. So if there's a head of the household, all their kids and also their grandkids can be in one Koseki record. So that's why when you find out your permanent domicile, what I would do is I'll look up those like the current address to see if someone shares the same surnames. And in the same exact area, there might be someone who's kept carrying all those important ancestor informations. Some of them could be like family trees or death registers or gravestones. So when you're able to find out those main family branch, Honke, you might be able to get like a lot of the information. But the difficult part is this part of the research is not just going to the libraries and looking at the record. It will be more like in-person communication. So if you don't know any Japanese culture or Japanese manner to how to contact with those people, you might not be able to get what you want. So that's the hardest part. So I went over like just briefly like some like the important resources I would use to look up Japanese ancestors. There's still more to look up, but what I wanted to say, especially at the conclusion, is so please start now. I know like after my presentation, some of you might think, oh wow, it's really difficult, especially people who don't speak Japanese. But please don't let Japanese stop you from doing the genealogy work. I heard some of the genealogists who don't speak, write, or read any Japanese, but they're still be able to request Koseki records and find their ancestors in Japan. So I would just definitely recommend you to start now. And second is, please ask professionals. If you have any problem with like looking up, you could always ask professional people, such as myself. And especially when it comes to old Japanese handwritings, they're really tricky. I would say most of the native Japanese right now, modern people like us, most of the native Japanese wouldn't be able to read any of the old Japanese handwritings if you don't have any practice before. So it's always great to ask professionals if you have no idea. And please don't throw away any records of your ancestors' information if you have. Some of the papers might look just plain paper, but it could be vital information. It could list like a very essential information about your ancestors. And especially when you come up with like any documents with the stamps on it, stamps means most likely they came from like a government officials. So don't throw away any records, especially with the stamps. And so today, I went over some of the resources just briefly. So some of you might still have a lot of questions or concerns about researching any genealogy work in Japan. But I would love to help you if you have any questions. And thank you so much for listening to my presentation. This is like my email address. So if you have any question, you can just contact me later. So thank you so much. And now I'll turn over to BYU Family History Library.
Okay, thank you so much, Koji, for that wonderful presentation. We will go ahead and open it up for our question and answer portion now. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section. And it looks like we already have one. Karen, she asks, my family is Koseki, approximately Meiji 28, gives the Honseki as, oh, sorry if I mispronounced this, 8 Hatsukaichi Cho Saikigun Hiroshima Ken. Do you have any recommendations or resources to determine where this is physically in the modern world? Would you use land registers and maps for that? Are those maps for sale available through the Legal Affairs Bureau as well, or are they elsewhere?
Okay, thank you for the question. So that's great that you already know the most likely like the permanent domicile of your ancestors with the Koseki. So if it's like approximately like early Meiji Koseki, those permanent domiciles should be matched with the address that you can look it up at the old land registers. So what I would do is first I would look it up. I would go to like the Legal Affairs Bureau to request all the registers associated with that permanent domicile you have. That's what I would do first. Then when it doesn't match, I have some resources that I can look it up to see if they would coordinate with like an old map. Then that's how I would do it. But if it's like a Meiji 28th Koseki record, I would say it should match with like the old land registers map. So you can just go ahead and ask for the Legal Affairs Bureau. Yeah, you can do that.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar. We hope you'll join us for our next webinar, which will be on June 6th with James Tanner on exploring the MyHeritage DNA tools. A recording of this webinar will be made available next week. You can view that on our YouTube channel or our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fh_webinars@byu.edu or follow our Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful week.